The world thought it knew the future of electric vehicles. Major automakers, global supply chains, and sprawling charging networks seemed to dictate who would lead the next mobility revolution. And then, from a continent often overlooked in tech headlines, a breakthrough emerged, an electric vehicle born from Africa's ingenuity, quietly poised to challenge the global status quo. It wasn't a marketing stunt, nor a theoretical concept. It was real, functional, and unstoppable. Maxwell Chikumbutso, a visionary from Zimbabwe, had conceived an EV that could operate without the constant dependence on charging stations or fuel. The vehicle harnessed energy in ways that defied conventional engineering. Motion, braking, and even terrain resistance were recycled into a self-sustaining power loop. While Africa nurtured the idea and developed the prototype, China saw an opportunity. With industrial precision, rapid manufacturing capabilities, and a networked approach to deployment, the vehicle was ready to leave the drawing board and hit the roads at scale. In cities and remote regions alike, fleets of the EV began to roll out, quietly demonstrating what the combination of African innovation and Chinese execution could achieve. But behind this remarkable story lay a tension few noticed at first. The vehicle wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was the center of a hidden tech battle. Established automotive powers watched as a new paradigm unfolded, a self-powered EV that challenged assumptions about infrastructure, energy dependency, and global supply dominance. Questions arose in boardrooms across Europe and the US. How could they compete with a system designed to operate independently? Anywhere on Earth? The impact was immediate. In urban centers, streets that once echoed with the hum of traditional electric vehicles now witnessed the silent efficiency of Maxwell's design. Rural areas, often neglected in the deployment strategies of conventional automakers, saw unprecedented access to reliable mobility. Supply chains were disrupted, logistics reimagined, and a quiet revolution began, one that didn't rely on traditional power grids, fuel stations, or regulatory loopholes. Observers noted something extraordinary. The EV didn't just survive extreme conditions, it thrived. Desert heat, icy mountains, flooded roads, and dense forests all became stages where the vehicle's engineering excellence could be measured. Sensors, adaptive suspensions, and energy recovery systems worked in perfect harmony, proving that resilience and sustainability were not mutually exclusive. Media coverage soon followed, highlighting the unusual partnership between Africa's inventive mind and China's industrial capacity. Headlines began to describe the phenomenon. Africa innovates, China deploys, the EV that defies limits, a global tech war over mobility's future. And while the world marveled, the quiet strategic battle intensified as established automakers scrambled to understand, replicate, or counteract this new form of self-sufficient transportation. Communities, engineers, and governments began to take notice. The EV was no longer a prototype, it was a signal that mobility could be fundamentally different. The technology challenged every assumption about what was possible in energy efficiency, urban planning, and global logistics. It became clear, whoever controlled this vehicle, or the principles behind it, would gain influence far beyond the automotive sector. And as Maxwell's EV continued its journey across continents, it wasn't just a vehicle in motion, it was a catalyst, a provocation, and the centerpiece of a hidden global struggle for technological supremacy. As Maxwell's EV rolled into major cities across Africa, the transformation was subtle but undeniable. Streets that had once been dominated by diesel taxis, conventional EVs, and gas-powered trucks now saw a new rhythm, silent, self-sustaining vehicles gliding efficiently through traffic. Urban planners and fleet operators began noticing the difference, not just in emissions but in operating costs, reliability, and adaptability to unpredictable conditions. In remote regions, the impact was even more profound. Villages cut off from roads or power grids suddenly had access to reliable transport. Goods moved faster, markets became more connected, and communities that were previously isolated began to thrive. The EV's ability to operate without reliance on charging stations or traditional fuel meant it was not just a vehicle, it was a lifeline, a bridge across previously insurmountable logistical challenges. Meanwhile, the hidden tech battle intensified. European and American automakers, long accustomed to controlling global EV markets, began analyzing the African innovation with urgency. Their engineers dissected performance data, while executives debated strategies to counteract a vehicle that challenged every assumption about energy, mobility, and infrastructure. But every delay, every bureaucracy, and every logistical hurdle only widened the gap, allowing Maxwell's EV to cement its presence. China's industrial deployment amplified the impact. Factories ran at full capacity, producing fleets that were quickly distributed across urban centers, industrial zones, and rural routes. Training programs for mechanics, fleet managers, and municipal planners ensured that the ecosystem around the vehicle was as robust as the vehicle itself. This wasn't just about selling cars. It was about embedding an entirely new mobility model into society. Public fascination grew alongside strategic tension. Social media feeds flooded with footage of the EV climbing desert dunes, gliding over icy mountain passes, and maneuvering through flooded roads. Headlines highlighted the unprecedented combination of African ingenuity and Chinese execution. The world began asking, if this vehicle could operate anywhere without traditional infrastructure, what did it mean for the future of transportation, logistics, and energy? Even as admiration spread, questions of influence and control loomed large. Governments, analysts, and corporations debated who held the advantage in this quiet but consequential global contest. Was it the African inventor whose design defied conventional limits, or the industrial powerhouse that had scaled the vehicle's deployment across continents? The answer was both, and it was reshaping the balance of technological power worldwide. Maxwell's EV had become more than a vehicle, it was a statement. Every route traversed, every fleet deployed, and every community connected demonstrated that innovation could bypass traditional barriers. It was a lesson in foresight, adaptability, and the untapped potential of mobility that relied not on legacy infrastructure, but on intelligent, self-sustaining design. And as the EV continued to expand its reach, moving silently through cities, deserts, jungles, and mountains, the world watched closely, realizing that the story of this vehicle was not just about transportation, it was about power, influence, and the future of a global technological landscape. As Maxwell's EV gained global attention, the hidden tech battle intensified behind closed doors. Policymakers, automotive executives, and energy strategists began holding emergency meetings. Europe and North America, long accustomed to controlling the EV narrative, now faced a challenge they had not anticipated, a vehicle born from Africa's innovation and scaled by China's industrial might. The realization was stark. This wasn't just about cars, it was about influence, control of supply chains, and the future rules of mobility. International media began highlighting the stakes. Reports detailed the EV's ability to operate in extreme conditions, from desert dunes and icy mountains to flooded roads and dense jungles, without stopping for fuel or charging. Analysts debated the broader implications. A self-sustaining vehicle could redefine logistics in disaster zones, remote regions, and emerging markets. It could shift the balance of industrial power, reduce dependence on traditional energy, and challenge decades of automotive dominance. Meanwhile, in Africa, communities experienced the practical benefits firsthand. Farmers transported goods to distant markets, hospitals received critical supplies in record time, and local businesses expanded operations thanks to reliable mobility. Governments saw reduced emissions, lower infrastructure costs, and new economic opportunities. Each success reinforced the global significance of what was unfolding. Maxwell's EV wasn't just a technological marvel, it was an engine of change. China's strategic deployment amplified the effect. Factories operated at unprecedented speed, producing fleets that were rapidly integrated into both urban and rural networks. Training programs equipped local technicians, drivers, and fleet managers to maximize efficiency, creating a self-sustaining ecosystem that operated independently of traditional power grids. Observers realized that Maxwell's EV represented not just a vehicle, but a blueprint for a new global model of mobility. Global corporations scrambled to respond. European and American automakers attempted to accelerate production, retrofit vehicles for extreme terrains, and secure partnerships in Africa. Yet each reactive measure highlighted a critical gap. While competitors relied on legacy infrastructure and incremental innovation, Maxwell's EV had already established itself as a functional, resilient, and scalable system. Public fascination continued to grow. Social media, streaming platforms, and news outlets showcased footage of the EV conquering seemingly impossible landscapes, emphasizing its silent efficiency and reliability. Commentators described it as redefining the rules of transportation and a glimpse into the future of self-sustaining mobility. But behind the headlines, the true story was far more complex, a global struggle over technology, influence, and the very definition of mobility in the 21st century. Even as admiration and scrutiny spread, the vehicle pressed forward. Every new terrain tested its limits, every successful mile reinforced its credibility, and every community connected underscored its societal impact. Maxwell's EV was not only demonstrating the power of innovation, it was shaping the future, quietly dictating how mobility, energy, and technology would interact across continents. The question that loomed larger with each passing day was unavoidable. Who would ultimately control the trajectory of this revolution? The inventor who dared to dream, the nation that scaled the vision, or the established powers now scrambling to catch up? As the hidden tech war escalated, global attention shifted from admiration to urgency. International agencies, trade organizations, and corporate conglomerates began closely monitoring the EV's deployment. Meetings that had once focused on market trends now centered on strategic influence, access to production technology, intellectual property rights, and control over supply chains. The vehicle's success was no longer a question of engineering, it was a matter of geopolitical leverage. In Africa, the real-world implications were visible on every street and rural path. Communities once isolated by geography or infrastructure limitations now experienced unprecedented connectivity. Hospitals received emergency supplies faster, businesses transported goods across challenging terrains with ease, and farmers expanded trade routes that were previously impassable. Maxwell's EV was not only demonstrating technological prowess, it was reshaping economies and livelihoods. China's industrial machinery amplified the impact. Mass production, efficient logistics, and training programs created a self-reinforcing ecosystem around the EV. Fleet operators, municipal planners, and local technicians were empowered to maintain and deploy vehicles without external assistance. Observers realized that the combination of African innovation and Chinese scalability represented a model of global influence previously unseen in the automotive world. European and American automakers reacted with urgency, initiating accelerated development programs and partnerships in Africa. Yet every delayed rollout, regulatory hurdle, and logistical complication highlighted the gap between reactive strategies and the proactive system Maxwell's EV had already established. The world was witnessing a shift in mobility power, one that redefined how innovation, production, and deployment intersected on a global scale. Media coverage amplified the story. Social platforms and news outlets broadcast dramatic footage, the EV climbing steep mountain passes, gliding silently across deserts, and navigating flooded forests with unmatched efficiency. Analysts speculated on the far-reaching consequences for energy consumption, infrastructure planning, and global logistics. It was clear that the vehicle was more than a marvel, it was a blueprint for the future. But the stakes continued to rise. Discussions in boardrooms and government offices moved from admiration to strategic planning. How could competitors reclaim influence, and what did this mean for global power dynamics in the automotive and energy sectors? Maxwell's EV had shifted the conversation from mobility to control of technology, influence, and access to a new paradigm of transportation. As the vehicle continued to traverse continents and extreme environments, it became apparent that the race was no longer about speed, horsepower, or luxury. It was about adaptability, resilience, and the ability to operate independently of conventional infrastructure. Every mile conquered, every community connected, and every challenge overcome reinforced its dominance, not just as a vehicle, but as a global symbol of what self-sustaining mobility could achieve. And while the world watched with a mix of awe, concern, and ambition, one fact became undeniable. Maxwell's EV had not only changed transportation, it had quietly redrawn the map of technological influence, leaving competitors to scramble in its wake. The climax of the hidden tech war began to unfold as global powers realized the full scope of Maxwell's EV influence. High-level negotiations, corporate alliances, and strategic maneuvers took place behind closed doors, all centered on gaining access to the vehicle's technology, production methods, and deployment strategies. The stakes were enormous. Control over this self-sustaining EV could redefine global energy dependence, logistics networks, and industrial power. In parallel, the EV itself continued to perform beyond expectations. Across deserts, mountains, jungles, and frozen tundras, it moved silently, efficiently, and reliably. Each successful journey reinforced the proof that mobility could thrive independently of conventional energy sources. Communities once isolated by geography or infrastructure limitations now relied on this vehicle, demonstrating its transformative societal impact. China's industrial scale accelerated the effect, producing fleets at a pace that no competitor could match. Training programs ensured local technicians could maintain and deploy vehicles efficiently, creating an ecosystem that operated autonomously. Meanwhile, Africa's original innovation had inspired a new generation of engineers, entrepreneurs, and policymakers, proving that ingenuity could originate anywhere and still influence the world stage. The response from established automakers was urgent but fragmented. Europe and North America initiated accelerated EV programs, sought partnerships, and even attempted to acquire technological insights, yet each move highlighted the gap between reactive strategies and the proactive, fully operational system that Maxwell's EV had already established. Every delay, regulatory hurdle, and infrastructure limitation underscored how rapidly the global balance of mobility power was shifting. Public fascination peaked as footage circulated of the EV navigating the most extreme terrains, desert dunes glowing under the setting sun, icy mountain passes reflecting auroras, and flooded jungle paths with the vehicle effortlessly forging ahead. Analysts discussed its far-reaching implications for disaster relief, remote connectivity, global logistics, and energy independence. Maxwell's EV was no longer just a vehicle, it had become a symbol of adaptability, resilience, and technological foresight. Meanwhile, strategic discussions escalated into high-stakes diplomatic and corporate maneuvering. Governments and multinational corporations debated intellectual property, access to resources, and control over supply chains. Conferences and secret meetings focused on the question, who would ultimately dictate the rules of this new era of mobility? Africa's invention, China's industrial execution, and global attention had created a convergence of technology, influence, and ambition that could no longer be ignored. Through it all, Maxwell's EV continued its journey, quietly demonstrating that the power of innovation combined with scalability and vision could outpace even the most entrenched competitors. Every new terrain it conquered, every remote community it connected, and every mile traveled reinforced a simple truth. The rules of transportation, energy, and global influence were being rewritten, one self-sustaining EV at a time. The world stood on the edge of a new chapter, one defined not by who had the largest factories, the most capital, or the most legacy infrastructure, but by who could innovate, adapt, and deliver mobility that transcended the limits of geography, energy, and expectation. The story of Maxwell's EV has proven one undeniable truth. Innovation, when combined with vision and execution, can rewrite the rules of mobility. Africa's ingenuity gave birth to the concept, China's industrial might scaled it to reality, and the world witnessed a vehicle capable of defying geography, energy dependence, and conventional limitations. This was more than a car, it was a symbol of what the future could hold: resilient, self-sustaining mobility accessible anywhere on Earth. Urban streets, remote villages, deserts, mountains, jungles, and icy tundras alike became stages where the EV demonstrated its unmatched adaptability. The hidden global tech war may have reshaped corporate strategies, geopolitical alliances, and industrial priorities, but one thing was clear: The future belonged to those who dared to innovate and deliver. Maxwell's EV didn't just challenge the world, it changed it. And as it continued to move silently across continents, connecting communities, inspiring engineers, and capturing imaginations, it left behind a powerful message. The era of self-sustaining, boundary-defying mobility has arrived, and the world will never look at electric vehicles the same way again.